And welcome into another episode of Justapod. My name is Craig Bone, your host, and we venture back into the Fox Valley Association once again. And it's head coach Brad Weber, this time from Oshkosh North. Hey, coach. Thanks for your
Hey,
time.
thanks
Thanks
for
for
having
joining
me.
us on game day, no less.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. One thing that caught me off guard a little bit as I scribbled some notes down, and I'm sure you're wondering the same thing. How does 9 years go by already? You're in your ninth season, taking over from your mentor, Hall of Famer Frank Schade. Talk about these 9 years and how much fun it's been, including a state championship in 2018.
Yeah, no, it definitely, the years go by quickly, and I think part of it is because each season you just dive into the group that you have and you try to maximize, the time you have with them. And then all of a sudden that season ends, they always end abruptly. And then, you kind of reevaluate what you got coming back in spring, and then you're back going again with open gyms and lifting and those kind of things. So yeah, they all just kind of keep going, from year to year, and for as long of a basketball season as it is every year, it seems to just fly by. It's wild that we're looking at the second half of the conference season starting next week already. Which I think is always a great sign that obviously you love what you do, and you're enjoying each day, each week, that you aren't sitting there looking at the calendar or looking at the watch trying to figure out when does this end.
Yeah, looking back on your career, I want to talk about Frank Schade because I know he's meant a lot in the Oshkosh community. A lot of people may not realize this. NBA draft pick, 1972, Kansas City Kings. He played 9 games, but what a phenomenal coach. Spent some time at Plymouth and then obviously many years at Oshkosh North. 609 victories. You spent a lot of time next to him on the bench. Talk about Frank, what he's meant to your career, and then maybe get into there's got to be some subtle differences between the way coach operated and the way maybe you do. I asked this of Ryan Bowers actually earlier this year because he's in a similar situation as you were 9 years ago when you took over for Frank. He takes over for Mike Shallow. Maybe just talk about those couple of angles if you can.
Yeah, no, for sure. Coach Shady has been a huge mentor for me, a huge, influence on the coach that I am. Spending 18 years with him, first and foremost, from the minute I got here, he was, so generous in his sharing his knowledge, but even just giving me pieces of things within the program to start kind of dabbling with and taking charge of our youth and that kind of stuff, knowing that I wanted to someday be a head coach. He was an open book, and just such great learning from watching and observing and being a part of his coaching staff and those teams, but also our conversations that we would have when we would go scouting on ways to back and forth from road games, early morning winter camps. Just all those conversations just influence how I look at things, how to deal with athletes, families, seasons, successful and ones where you're, in the adversity stage of it. And then, look at just who he is as a person. When we have a team that could have gone to state his final year, and then a group that's extremely talented coming back, and that's when he decided to retire, because he said he never wanted to be one of those coaches who just left the cupboard dry. For the amount of time he put in at Oshkosh North, he didn't want it to be about him. He wanted to be about the program, and that he wanted to leave that program in a good spot and not leave once all the talent left. So, just a great guy that has still, been in our corner, comes to all of our home games and a lot of our road games. A guy that, we continue to have conversations just about life in general, about our specific team. He's been a great resource, continues to be a great resource for me.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I had him on at halftime a couple of years ago at Kakana, but you mentioned the cupboard not being empty. Boy, I guess not. He left you some talent to say the least, and obviously that culminated in a 2018 state championship. Before we get into your team here this year a little bit, and I want to talk about some recent games, you've had a really tough schedule, no question about that. I wanted to ask you some specific things from a strategy standpoint. I meant to ask you this. I've been thinking about it for a few days now. I want you to talk about the 1-3-1 defense, how that began under Coach Schade, and then how you've continued to run it. When you like to run it, I know you don't run it all the time. Obviously, you mix your defenses up. Talk to our listeners and viewers about the 1-3-1, maybe without giving away too many secrets, how to attack it and really how to run it from a defensive side of things. How does it operate?
Yeah, no, we kind of came upon the 1-3-1 early, kind of early to mid 2000s. We had a family that who've been around the valley will know quite well, the Wera family, and they would get into foul trouble early. And so we had to find a way to try and maybe stave off some foul trouble, but yet stay to our core values of working hard on defense, trying to, you know, in a way, dictate on defense what other teams are going to do. And Coach Schade was friends with Steve Kloss out of Adams Friendship, and Kloss had been running the 1-3-1 at Adams Friendship at an extremely high level. And they started to have those conversations, and we put it in, worked to what we were looking for in the world of it, kept our guys out of foul trouble in the first half, and we were able to still dictate, how teams were going to attack us. I think that even still to this day, my philosophy for defense has always been, we want to have a say in how you attack. I think that everybody has a man-to-man offense. Everybody practices that from day one, every day. And you've got your guys that you want to get touches and in the places you want them to touch the ball on the court and man-to-man. And there are different ways to manipulate that within a man-to-man defense. But once you go to a zone, it changes things a little bit. And a 1-3-1 being an odd front, takes a unique look at, how you trigger your offense and where you put people. So we found, obviously success with that zone once we put it in, and beyond just staying out of foul trouble, just learning how to perfect our coverages and how our movement works. I think, maybe the biggest misnomer of, our zone at least, is that it has a lot of man-to-man principles. And we practice man-to-man every day. And, I think zones sometimes get a bad name because, especially in youth, people sit in a 2-3. And when I say sit, they sit. They don't really move from spot to spot. And for those who've watched us play our zone, there's not a lot of sitting. We aren't real docile. We're on the move. We're aggressive, and we're busting our tail. And that's kind of always been a piece of who Oshkosh North is from a DNA standpoint. So no matter what defense we want to play, we want to make sure that we're trying to dictate, that we're working as hard as we can physically work. And then again, just trying to dictate to teams, maybe a different strategy of attacking than what they do 80 to 85% of the season.
Yeah, that zone is fun to watch. You've had some very long athletes over the years. Ty Haliburton comes to mind amongst others, but it really helps when you have that length, especially on the top of that 1-3-1. It makes passing the ball obviously very difficult. Let's talk about this season so far. I find it interesting when I look at the FVA standings each and every year, and I think you can probably relate to this a little bit because last year you were going through some similar things where that record, was kind of fluctuating around 500 maybe in conference, and then you guys kind of got heated up later on in the year. I look at the standings right now, you're sitting in fifth, and some people might look at that and say, they're 5-3, they're 7-4 overall. You got to remember, this is the FVA. If you're 5-3 in the FVA, you're over 500, you're a pretty good basketball team. But talk about this conference, especially this year, Kaukauna obviously having another tremendous season, Appleton North, Kimberly, and Neenah, all teams that you're chasing right now. But just talk about this overall conference, and then we get into your specific games a little bit here recently down at Concordia, game against Dominican, and Slinger, one of the best teams in Division II. But just maybe give us a little overview of this whole entire season so far.
Yeah, you mentioned last year, and there was a lot of learning that happened last year. We missed Bryce Ott for 3/4 of our season with a broken ankle. And
Yeah.
so, I think anytime you spend a offseason in a summer building your identity with your complete group, and then you start the season without key pieces, it takes a while to have everybody else kind of adjust. And especially when it's a player that was last year at Bryce's level, everybody has to step up another spot, and that takes a while for our guys last year to kind of settle into those roles. And then once we got Bryce back, we felt whole again. Everybody had improved individually and then got to settle back from being the second option to the third. And that's really kind of when things were clicking for us. And in our conference, the FVA, is as I think competitive as a conference from top to bottom as any conference in our state. They're, the Greater Metro, the Madison Conference. Also, I think they have great top level teams, but I don't know if that level of competition year in, year out goes as deep as it does in the FVA. And so the other thing is, nobody takes it easy or feels sorry for you in this conference. So when you're missing a key player, nobody's saying, "Oh, poor Oshkosh North." You're going for your wins because they're extremely difficult to get. This year is a little bit of the same in the world of missing Dalton Clark up until this past Tuesday's game. We're still missing Eli Ott, who had broke the top of his foot in football, and so he'll be coming back in the second half of the conference. So again, there's that adjustment period that way. And then when you look at our three conference losses, all three we had, leads with under 4 minutes to go. And that's part of the learning process that happens too when you have Mr. Basketball last year who had the ball in his hands every time down the stretch in tight games. We have a ton of experience coming back, but guys that weren't in that position. And so until you're in that position, it's tough to learn from experience. And so, there have been great learning moments. We've made some big gains from some of those disappointing losses. But again, in the FVA, oftentimes the game comes down to about the last 4 minutes, and then it's who can
Yeah.
close, and then it becomes who can handle adversity, because you can play really good in a week and have two losses, and
Yeah.
that's just how it is. And trying to keep kids and oftentimes parents, in the boat rowing the same way, because guess what? Adversity hits, and this conference is tough, and this is what happens. Is, I think, all the stuff that gets you ready for March and gets you ready for those deep runs. And I think if we have Bryce last year, the record obviously looks a lot better. But I wonder where we would have been come March. I wonder if, some of those guys who got, we always say great teams expose weaknesses, and then you work on those weaknesses. And that's why I think our conference does so well in the tournament, is because there's pretty much no stone unturned by the time March comes for an FVA team. You know
Yeah.
what you do well, you know where you had to improve, and the coaches in this conference are all top notch, and they get better. You watch teams, a week from week, they are glaringly better each week based off of
Yeah.
these games. And so, we're taking that approach this year too. Like, we've been there, and all of these seniors have been on varsity since their sophomore year, obviously playing different roles, but they've been a part of conference championship. They've been a part of a team that's qualified for state. So they know what it takes. And that's the fun part day in, day out, is they come back hungrier and tougher. And those are the kind of guys that, you love going into games like tonight against the top rated, Kakana team. You like that because that's what makes it fun. And that's what sports, I think, is all about, is going out competing and testing yourself.
Yeah. Your record could easily be 8-1 without a doubt, or 8-0, I guess I could say. Those three losses, by the way, 4 points to Appleton North. You lose by 4 to Neenah, and you lose by 1 against Kimberly. I mean, that's unbelievable. That's 9 points, three losses, and that just goes to show you the fine line between wins and losses in a very good conference. Before we get into the Kaukauna game this evening, let's go down that roster a little bit. So Bryce Ott, obviously one of your team leaders, key guy coming back, averaging a little over 22 points, 9 rebounds, ranked number 16 in the 2026 class, already committed to Minnesota State. Talk about his game, and really got a really great basketball body, if you will. And we're going to talk about your son, Owen Weber, another tall, lanky kid, 6'7". Both those guys, very similar body types. But first, talk about Bryce and his game.
Yeah, no, Bryce, I'd say the number one word that always comes to mind besides competitiveness is his aggression. He is a very aggressive kid with the ball in his hands, attacking rebounds, defensively at the top of our zone. He is a game wrecker, and the cool thing about Bryce, and I think, as you go through the years, how people get their points is always, interesting, right? Is it high volume? Is it ball in your hands? And Bryce is one of those who can kind of do it in any manner. He can create it off of defense. He can create it in transition. He can create it with a catch and a rip. So he has a variety of ways that he can get the ball in the basket. And then the other thing is he never presses. He never tries too much. He always takes, what comes to him within our offense. And I would say just across the board, that's who our team is right now. If you look at our balanced scoring, it's a group that, shares the ball and utilizes each other's strengths that way. When we can put out some height, when we can put out some, quickness with our guards, and then obviously, a nice inside out, combo there for our team. But Bryce is able to do all of those things for us and is just, a great captain and leader for us.
Yeah, you got some size, no question. 6'7" there. We talked about him. Owen Weber, 6'7", one of your two sons that are on the team. Jackson Anderson, along with Tylen Lister, all seniors. You talked about the experience. Maybe talk about those three players and what they bring to the table. And it's interesting, Jackson Anderson and your son, Owen Weber, right around 12.9 points per game. So some very good balance, as you just referenced.
Yeah, no, when you look at Jackson, Owen, and Ty, they all were playing roles for us as sophomores when they were playing with Stevie Clark and Zay Mitchell, two D1 basketball players, and their IQ is so high. And that's why they were great fits as sophomores. Is they're skilled, but they knew their role with that team. They knew their role last year. They know their role this year, and it's pretty cool that like specifically those three had a lot to offer offensively the last 2 years, but realized what our team needed, and they were, selfless enough to do that for us. And now this year, we've got them being able to show a little more completeness. I think a lot of people probably came in pegging Owen as just a shooter. And when you look at his stats, he's shooting it at a decent clip, but he's also scoring points in the paint. He's second on our team in rebounds right now. I think the last 2 games he's had a double-double. So like there's more to it. Same with Jackson, and Tylen. They both are good outside shooters, but they can create a ton for us off of penetration. And then again, are heady enough to get a stride stop in the lane if, they've got someone on their hip, and then find the next weapon. And so those guys and their experiences, have really helped us just hit the ground running in summer and continued into, the season now. And that allows us to have, some sophomores up on varsity that, maybe weren't ready for varsity level, but due to injuries out of football, we needed them. And all of a sudden, because of that leadership, because of that, solid play out of our seniors, our sophomores could come in and fill in a nice, perfect mold in that Goldilocks way.
And Brady Anderson, one of those sophomores that have filled in quite nicely, about 8 points per ball game. But I think Dalton Clark, you've talked about him coming off the football injury, played his first game the other night against Oshkosh West. 6 points, couple of rebounds. Got to ask you about these two names. You've already brought one of them up. I brought the other one up. And I talked about Ty Haliburton a little bit ago, 2018. Boy, what a interesting year that was. Kaukauna wins the state title that year as well. Jordan McCabe, Ty Haliburton, boy, what some battles. Those were some classic basketball games. And then Zay Mitchell last year, 34 points a game, player of the year, of course, in the FVA, goes on to Iowa State. Let's talk about these two guys and what that does to a basketball program. When I talk about past players that are that successful, what does that do to your basketball program? Not only the guys that are on the team now, but how about that fourth grader, that fifth grader, sixth grader that sees the type of success? How much can that catapult the basketball program into higher goals?
Yeah, no, that's what tradition does. So like I'm gonna go back to so when Ty was a fourth grader, Tyrese was a fourth grader, our 2009 group goes to state and his brother was on that group, and there was a name for those who followed basketball for a long time, Tank Johnson, who
Mm,
was our guy, he was our stud, and he watched us lose in the state semis, and he's had many interview where he said he walked away going, "I'm going to win a state championship for North." But he was fired up as a fourth grader watching that success, seeing that
sure.
playoff run, and then Tyrese's year in 2018. Zay is a fifth grader. The senior group are fourth graders. Owen was a ball boy on that team. And same thing. They see the excitement. They see, special players like Haliburton, Quincy Anderson, and they get excited about the game. They get excited, and all of a sudden you want to emulate what those guys do. And that lights that fire into that next group, that young group. And then all of a sudden, there you are last year, with this group that was inspired watching the 2018 team, and they make that, run. And all of a sudden, here we are at summer camp, and Zay is still around, comes back from Iowa State, and he's a celebrity with all of our youth kids.
I'm sure.
Bryce and Owen are 6'7", and these little third graders' minds, the tallest things in the world, but they get to see him work, because when our youth camp is going on, our varsity guys are doing a shooting workout, and they look over and they see the type of work these guys put in, and they see the fun that they have putting in work. And that's that culture piece, right? And that's the tradition that everybody grows up in that gym. And they just kind of realize, number one, that's fun and I want to do that. Number two, they get to see those guys and interact with those guys. So it's human.
Yeah.
It's not just, like when I'm growing up, I'm watching NBA players. I'm like, oh, I want to do that. But I never got to see what Michael Jordan was
Right.
doing behind the scenes, but these guys get to
Yeah.
see what our guys do behind the scenes, because they're in the gym at the same times, or coming out of a workout or going into a workout. So they get to see it, they get to talk to it. And then I think that's the other cool thing of, the fact that we always say tradition never graduates. Like the amount of our
Mm,
guys, alumni who come back and they will, talk to our team, or Tyrese being able to help kind of mentor Zay during his recruiting phase, and Zay's ability to come back to camp in summer and interact with our
yeah.
younger guys, and find a seventh grader and say, hey, think about this move. Like those kind of things matter a ton in the world of keeping basketball exciting, keeping it fun, but also understanding it's not something magical that happens. It comes out of a lot of hard work and a lot of time in the gym.
No doubt about that. Got to ask you a couple more questions as we're visiting with head coach Brad Weber from Oshkosh North. At what point did your brain say, I think Tyrese Haliburton could be an NBA player someday? Did it ever click at any point in his high school career?
Yeah, no. I mean, what I tell everybody is, if you would have told me this in youth or in high school, I would have told you that you're crazy. But from being able to be a part of his journey, I'm not surprised one bit.
Yeah,
But I think that that's kind of, professional sports has always been that dream for a lot of people, but it happens to such a select few. And
yeah,
so, no matter what, like, even saying all NBA, gold medal, world champion, are all those things capable for him? Yes. And he's done, a few of those, but it's such elite levels of company, and it is so difficult to do that,
yeah,
for anybody to be like, yeah, I knew it then. Like maybe LeBron, Shaquille, like guys who have that physical
yeah, yeah,
prowess at an early age are kind of like, yeah, that's an immovable object. That's somebody that is just a freak athlete. Tyrese has never been that, right? You still kind of
yeah,
look at him and you're like, can he last? So, but when you're around him and you see his work ethic, and you see, to me, still, I don't think he gets enough credit for just what a great teammate and energy giver that he is. Back when he was on the U19 U.S. team, it's always like every time, every step was like, well, will he make the team? And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
he's starting. And then it's like, all right, he's going to get drafted, but okay. Or even when he gets to Iowa State, will he redshirt? Will he play? And all of a sudden he's starting,
Yeah.
against Missouri, and never gives up his starting spot. Like every time, there's always, I think with everything, if you're realistic with it, there's always, this, well, if we identify all the other talent and things out there, it's not a no brainer. Yet when you watch and you see what he does, it starts to become a no brainer.
Yeah.
And I think that's been very cool to watch. And just, he's been gracious enough to allow me to be a part of that journey, and just our conversations. He's approaching it the right way, which makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, he's been just fabulous with the Indiana Pacers. My goodness, some of the stuff he does on the floor, some of his passing skills, his assist to turnover ratio is pretty good, I'm assuming, but the way he handles himself on the court, not really known as a scorer, probably more of a helper, right? I don't know what his assist totals are, but I know he is very good at distributing the basketball. And that Indiana team has been obviously very good with him, and obviously others. So, yeah, just an unbelievable story to see one of your guys make it to the pro game. And who knows? Zay Mitchell, could he follow in those same tracks? There's no question he does have the skill level. But let's finish with this. So, big night tonight, obviously. Oshkosh North, your team visiting Kaukauna. It's an honor going out tonight for one of your longtime rivals, obviously Mike Shallow, 30 years at Kaukauna. Maybe just take 30 seconds to a minute here and talk about the career that Coach Shallow has, and just how tough his teams have been over the years. Your team, his team, highest winning percentage since 96 in the Fox Valley Association. So you two guys know each other super well. Just talk about his career a little bit in this Kaukauna program going into
Yeah,
tonight's
no,
game.
he's done, a heck of a job with Kakana, with the basketball program. And again, another guy who has set that program, in a place where it can continue that success. But, I think Mike is known very well for his ability to develop players. I think that his offensive mind is one of the top that, in my 27 years of being a coach in this conference, easily, one of the elite few that, each year you watch the action they run, you watch their ability to create easy opportunities, and you just kind of scratch your head at, like, man, that's really brilliant stuff. So, I think his way to develop players, his way to create, just and recreate offensive schemes, and then competitiveness, right? Like we talked about earlier, how tough this conference is. So to be able to win at the rate that he was able to win at, that's more than just talent. There are a lot of talented teams in our conference that don't always end up with great records. It's the competitiveness, and his. I haven't had a chance, never got a chance to watch him run a practice or anything, but I can only imagine exactly how detailed he always had to be, and how competitive they had to be in those, because you watch them in games and that's exactly how they played. So no, it is always, an entertaining and great challenge to play a Kakana team. They will for sure test you. They for sure are going to have new wrinkles for you. And, in our case, at least when we play them, typically it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. And that, I think, is always entertaining to the crowd. But I think always, players, those are the kind of games you remember and look forward to.
It's interesting you mentioned points. You're 0.2 tenths of a point behind Kokana right now for leading the FVA in scoring. So this should be a very entertaining game tonight. But yeah, high scoring you would think, but sometimes it happens the opposite way. Maybe this game slows down. I don't know what your strat. Well, let's finish with this. Maybe give us a couple of keys for you guys tonight going into Kokana. Really looking forward to this battle. But talk about what Coach Bowers brings to the table as well, taking over for Mike Shallow. But talk about tonight's game a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they have hit the ground running where they left off from last year with Mike. And for us defensively, we're going to have to be elite because they have great shooters. Obviously, the best inside presence that I think our state has with Jensen, who's more than just an inside player. But when you've got a Division One, scholarship player at that size, and you've got guards who can handle it and shoot it the way they do, we're going to have to be really good with our assignments, and we're going to have to try our best to limit them on the boards, because if they miss, we can't give them a second chance. They're too good. They won't miss the
Yeah.
second time. And then offensively, we just have to continue to be balanced and look for our opportunities that exist within either mismatches based off of recovering screens or just simply what tonight looks like in the world of one-on-one matchups. And then, in the end, as fun as these games are and as important as, they feel today, it's being able to identify where are we, where do we need to get to before we see him again, and then just start chipping away at that. And that's tough sometimes. And to remember too that after a big matchup like this, that win or lose, it's just a game, because we've been a part of things like this where you win and then you feel so dang good about yourself, and then on Tuesday you lay an egg because you're still enjoying that win. And
Yeah.
so, in the end, just helping high school and teenage boys remember that this is just one step in the process. And, it's about being ready come March. But these kind of games, they get you ready for March, because you're going to run into really good teams and you're going to run into really fun atmospheres. And here's
Yeah.
another example for us on being able to just get that experience, see where we stack up, and compete. And like I said earlier about this team, these guys love competing, and they love playing for each other. So walking into a game like this, it's a great opportunity for us. And I know for sure we will maximize that opportunity regardless of what it says on the scoreboard. We'll be better because of it at the end. And I'm sure Kakana will be too.
Yeah, this is pretty much what a tournament game could potentially look like, whether it be regional, sectional, state competition. I mean, your two teams are going to go to battle tonight, and really looking forward to it. Hey, thanks for spending some time with us, Coach Weber. It's always fun catching up with you. And I will be speaking with you again, pregame style interview, a little bit shorter than this one. And that'll be the next time you guys play Kakana at home, where you played a thriller last year that Kakana won on a buzzer beater. I know that was a tough loss to start the season on, but like you said, you can't overrate the wins and you can't undervalue the losses, I guess, is what you just said. So, hey, thanks for your time. Good luck tonight. We'll see you in Kakana here in just a few hours.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, head coach Brad Weber was our guest on the Justapod podcast. My name is Craig Bone. If you want to listen or view this particular podcast and all the others that we've done, head over to justagame.com. You can catch them there, or go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can get the Justapod there as well. So our guest once again today was Brad Weber, head coach of Oshkosh North. We'll talk to you next time on the Justapod. Thanks, everybody.